Alright guys, this is how you're going to start pretty much every English class. You'll get what's called a daily language review. You'll work on it for about 5 minutes and then we will go through it, usually through one of these video recordings. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to go through the answers. If you notice, we have Wednesday, week 1. So number 1 says, Maria and Paul has a big birthday celebration every June. So what I'm simply going to do is I'm going to go through, I'm going to make the corrections. You should have corrected Maria and Paul, because they're names of people. Obviously they're going to get a capital letter. So on your sheet right now, if you haven't made the corrections to those mistakes, you should be making those corrections at this point. If you notice, the word celebration actually is underlined, so that's obvious that there's a spelling mistake. And anytime you have a spelling mistake on your computer, and I know you're not on your computer now, but one trick you can do for spell check is you go ahead and right click that, and it will give you an option for the answers how to spell it right. And so you can see celebration, the correct way to spell it's right there, and that'll change it to celebration for you. So Maria and Paul has a big birthday celebration every June. June's a month, it's going to get capitalized. If you notice, there's no end mark down here, so we want to go ahead and put a period for our end mark. One other thing, it says has. Since there's Maria and Paul, that's 2 people, we want to go with have. Whenever we have a plural for our subject, we go with have. If it was just Paul, then it'd be Paul has a big birthday celebration. But it's not, it's Maria and Paul. Moving on to number 2. Geometry isn't very difficult for me. Algebra is more hard. Always capitalize the beginning of a sentence. Okay, and we want to make that geometry. Another thing to keep in mind is it's giving the name of a class, like the title of a class, and so those get capitalized when it's the title of a class. So algebra will go ahead and capitalize, and you'll see later algebra will get capitalized anyways, but geometry isn't very difficult. That part's okay, isn't very difficult for me. What we want to do though is we want to put a period. Isn't very difficult for me, period. Algebra is more hard, and so we want to make that a sentence of its own. Algebra is harder instead of hard because we're comparing it to geometry, and so it is harder. What you had was a run-on sentence until you corrected that, and we'll talk this year about run-on sentences and different ways to correct those run-on sentences. I just want to add a comma to isn't. And difficult is misspelled because it doesn't have 2 F's. There should be 2 F's whenever you spell difficult. So geometry isn't very difficult for me. Algebra is more harder. I still have one more mistake in there. When you go to the comparative form and you only have 1 syllable like hard, get rid of that more. Algebra is harder. And again, we'll talk about comparative and superlative form as the year goes on. Number 3, they're just looking for a contraction, and they started with should not, and we just want to make that shouldn't. Okay, instead of should not, we want to go ahead and make that shouldn't. And as you can see on there, when I put that in red, that would be the proper spelling. Number 4 is looking for coordinating conjunctions. We'll talk a lot this year about coordinating conjunctions or correlative conjunctions or subordinating conjunctions. Coordinating is probably the easiest one, the ones that you're most used to. They just combine 2 words together. The starling and the house finch were introduced to the United States in the 1800s. It's going to be the word and you'll see on the side here, I'll put up what the 7 common coordinating conjunctions are to look for. But for right there, it's just and, so you should have had and marked on there. And then the last sentence is a run-on that you had to correct. Dr. Andre has been my dentist for 5 years. He is very gentle. The run-on sentences happen because you have 2 independent clauses that are put together, but they're not really given anything to separate them. And so when you just go comma and then you start your next sentence, that's not correct. So you can do a couple things. One thing you can do is you can just make a period and then capitalize the H, and then you have he is very gentle. Dr. Andre has been my dentist for 5 years. He is very gentle. You could have put a semicolon in there. You could have possibly done comma conjunction. All things that we'll talk about as the year goes on. One thing that I want you to do right now, one habit that I want to get into, is just take one thing that you learned today, just on these 5 sentences, and write it down on the back of your daily language review. And we'll probably go around the class and maybe have a few people volunteer. What's one thing I learned today with this grammar, whether it be conjunctions or run-ons or abbreviations or anything. What's one thing you learned today? And we'll go ahead and give you a couple minutes to do that.